Good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations at Kerrie's Corner. This is Kerrie. Hope you're doing well on this Tuesday of August 2024. Today we are going to talk about blended families and the challenge for blended families because they are real. As somebody who has been in a blended family now for 34 years, I have firsthand experience on what it means to have a blended family, the struggles, the joy, the hardships, the frustrations, the stress that it puts on a couple who have children. And then if that couple has other children, the stress that it causes those other children. It is a very, very challenging family dynamic because there's others outside the family that influence the family dynamic. My husband and I met when I had a young son. My husband had a young daughter. They're about a year apart. My son is the eldest of the two, so we have mine, his, and ours. My oldest child is a boy. He's now a paramedic. He's 38 years old. My husband's daughter is 37 years old, and she is a nurse, a surgical nurse. And our child, a boy, a son, he is 31 years old, and he is a probation officer. So we are very, very proud of our children. They are all in the public arena, taking care of the public. My oldest is a first responder. My youngest works in criminal justice, in law enforcement. And then our daughter, she helps people in their need when they're in surgery. So I'm very proud of my children and the choices that they've made to help other people. I think that is a very selfless decision, and it's not easy. It's not easy on the three of them. Each profession has its own challenges, and I feel like, especially the two older children, I feel like our blended family definitely influenced their career choices because of what they saw, witnessed, and experienced firsthand. So my husband and I got married. We're both obviously from divorce, and when we went into our relationship, were we blind? Were we blind? I think we were naive. I think we really didn't expect what we ended up living through. We were just, madly in love, and he's my soulmate, I'm his soulmate, and we just dove right in. And the stresses appeared really early in our relationship. Whenever you are a step parent, there's a very fine line that you walk, and sometimes that can be skewed, and not pleasant things can happen. And there's a lot of external influence and forces that come into a step family. Obviously, there is another parent involved, there is other family involved, and then you have another family and another parent on the other side. So not only do we have one ex, but we have two exes that we are trying to sort of do a juggle with and a dance with. That's really the only way I can look back on those years and think, how did we manage it? We just juggled it. I mean, we did. One day we were here, the next day we're here, the next day we had this issue, the next day we had that issue, and it was a juggling act. One relationship, and when I speak of relationship, my husband's in my relationship. One relationship that we had with one of the exes was fabulous. That's my ex-husband. The other relationship was toxic, and it was a frustrating sort of situation to be in because it can happen. You can have a good relationship as a divorced couple and raise your child. My oldest son will tell you he has 4 parents. Every decision about his life, the 4 of us discussed. My husband and I, my ex-husband and his wife, and we all get along, and we are good friends. And we had no problem communicating and working together. Unfortunately, we did not experience that on the other side. And so you've got this really positive over here, dealing with this child over here, and then you have this really toxic relationship over here, and it's like oil and water. And so you're constantly doing a juggling act to know the best way, the best decisions. You know, every decision has a 3 and 4 layer examination of the decision, because there's our relationship, there's our child's feelings, there's our other child's feelings, there's the ex on this side, and there's the ex on that side. So I mean, it's just a complex, sometimes very destructive situation. And the one thing that my husband and I always said to each other when we decided to go ahead and get married, and we saw things before we got married, so we were not completely blind to what we were getting into. I do feel like we were extremely naive looking back, but it wasn't as common when we married. Yes, there was divorce, but it just wasn't a subject that you could really get a lot of help with. That's completely changed, because now that's the norm. So one of the things that my husband and I said very early on in our relationship is that it didn't matter what the circumstances, what we were dealing with, who we were dealing with, what child we were dealing with, whatever the circumstances were, we always had to prioritize and put our marriage first. Because we're very traditional in that we both were married, we had a child in wedlock, and then we both divorced. And so we've seen the disillusionment and the dissolving of a relationship that we both took our vows very seriously for. And so we made a very conscious decision very early on that if we did not prioritize our relationship and our marriage, everything else would fall apart, because the marriage is the basis for the family unit. And even when you have children that come into that marriage from other relationships, they still have to work within the circulus or the nucleus of your marriage. And if you can't prioritize that, you're going to have issues. And you know, it's not easy. You know, you've got a child with somebody else, but you have to do that. If you don't do that, then these little cracks start to seep into the foundation, because your marriage is the foundation of your family unit. Even a blended family, your relationship and the commitment, the 2 people that I'm talking about, the nucleus of a family today is very, very different, right? It's very, very different. I'm talking about the 2 people that are in a committed relationship, whether you're married or not married, whether you're a man and a woman, 2 women, two men, I don't care what it is. I'm just saying that the nucleus, the 2 that are committed to each other, that are building this family unit, have to be the priority of that family unit above everything else, even the children. Because that is how the foundation of a family starts, is that commitment to each other and that relationship. And if anything is prioritized over that, it's not going to survive. And that is the one thing for a blended family that must survive, is the relationship between the 2 people that have committed to build a family. Now, obviously it's different when you're bringing children into the family, and there are always, I don't care what anybody tells you, there are always going to be those situations and those examples where the child has struggled adjusting. It can't be any other way. You have to know that going into it, that you are going to have times where your children are going to need outside help. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And as a parent, you have to be willing to do that. And you have to be willing to do it with the child's other parent as well. So you could be in a family counseling meeting with you as a couple, your ex, and the other party's ex. So they could have now a relationship. So there could be 6 people in it. And if you're not willing to do that, you might as well just not go any further, because it is how you have to prioritize. And if you can't be willing to do that, and neither one of us had a clue when we got married that we were going to be in sessions with our spouses when it came to our relationship and our children. I don't think either one of us even thought about that. I can tell you from my own, it never crossed my mind. So that's the first thing I would tell you, is if you are planning to have a blended family, you need to be open-minded enough to know that you are going to be dealing with your ex and somebody else's ex in family situations. And you have to be open-minded enough to be able to do that. If you're not, you're going to struggle, and I mean mightily struggle. So we made that commitment, and we were criticized. We were criticized for making that commitment, and people would say, "But you have a child before you were married. You have to put your child first." I don't agree with that. If you bring your child with you into a new relationship, your relationship must take the priority, because if it doesn't, then you've exposed your child to another broken relationship. They're already experiencing one for the rest of their life. Their parents aren't together. So if they now are in another family situation and that family situation doesn't work, now they have another broken relationship that they have to work on. So you have to go into it knowing this, and you have to be open-minded. And then you know, a lot of us think, oh, our kids are going to get along. Oh, that is not the case in a lot of families. So you have to be able to figure out how to work through the disagreements with your children and stay unified as a couple. You cannot show favoritism one over the other, because trust me, it doesn't stay in the relationship. It goes to the other parents outside the relationship, and then, my God, that's when all hell breaks loose. So you have to have a unified front on everything, whether they walk to the grocery store, whether they go on a date, whether you buy a car or buy a phone, or they're allowed to go on a prom or an overnight visit somewhere. You have to project a unified front. Because what happens that I now see looking back in the 34 years is the kids will figure it out as they get older, and they will figure out in their relationships, at least in my situation they did. They figured out in their relationships how to work with each other and how to communicate with each other. Not until much later, but they just sort of figured it out. And I think the reason they figured it out is because they knew they could not divide and conquer. Okay, children are going to try to do that anyways, right? Even with our youngest son, who is our child, it's just normal. That's what kids do. They go to dad and they say, "Dad, can I do this?" And he'll say no, and then he'll come to mom, and mom will say yes, and then here you go. You've got a divided front. And setting that precedent for our 2 older children was crucially important. If we had not done that, I wouldn't be making this video. I know that as sure as you and I are talking. So you have to prioritize your relationship, because it is the nucleus of your family. you just can't. There's no getting around it. If you don't, I don't know what the statistics are, but I would have to guess that it's very, very high, that the new family nucleus is not going to survive. And then working out the relationship, you're letting your children work out their relationships can be a struggle, because you, as a parent, automatically want to side with your child, and you can't do that, because then the other child will realize that you're siding with the other child, and then it creates this hostility again. It's a very fine line. And then when you have a child of your own, and that child of your own grows, it gets older, and they see their two older siblings and the way they work in their relationship, that's going to directly affect that child's relationship with his two siblings, because children are extremely smart. They know where the cracks are, and they go to those cracks, and they try their hardest to utilize those cracks to their best interest. That's just it's just natural. It's just a normal thing. I can remember looking back on my own childhood and thinking, oh my gosh, I got to make sure that I get to dad, because I know if I get to dad and I ask dad, he's going to always say yes, because I'm his little girl. And I knew then that if I got to dad first, the likelihood of me getting a yes was so much more than if I'd have gone to mom first, because if I had gone to mom first, there ain't no way, it'd have been a no, and that was the end of it. So children know how to navigate. They are extremely adept in figuring that out, and what's the weak link. So you have to have a unified front. You also have to have a unified front because you have other parents that are going to be invading your relationship, because you have children that you've brought to your relationship. And if those relationships are not good, it's exhausting. And it can be devastating. It can crush somebody. It can cause psychological damage for decades. So I think you also, as a newly married couple with children, you have to set boundaries very quickly. You have to set what's going to be acceptable and what's not going to be acceptable from your ex-spouse very, very, very quickly, because inevitably it's going to happen, and there's going to be those situations where one or both of the ex-spouses are going to be brought into a situation, and then it just becomes this, for lack of a better description, it becomes like what we are watching right now with the Republicans and the Democrats. That's a great analogy, actually, because it can be toxic. It can be absolutely destructive, because everybody has their own position that they're trying to get. And if you have 6 adults that you're trying to maneuver positions with, and then you have 2 minor children that are, because of all of it just becomes this juggling act, and you have to communicate with each other. I can remember early on in our marriage, because of the personality differences between myself and my husband. I'm a Gemini, he's a Scorpio. I'm very, very much a communicator, he is not. We would have these knockdown drag-outs where I would have to drag it out of him to talk about the nucleus of our family and what was happening and the toxicity that was evolving, and what were we going to do to fix it. You have to communicate with each other. You have to be brutally honest with your children. You have to let them know. I am not a parent that sheltered our children. We told them what was going on, when it was going on, how we were going to do it. If they didn't like it, they could voice their opinion, but ultimately we made the decision, and they would either have to accept it or be unhappy for a little while, and we had that too. But keeping our relationship and making our children respect our relationship is a crucial part of a blended family's survival. Because if the children do not respect the relationship, you might as well just part ways real quickly and say, it could have been great, but we're not going to even go down that road. That's how absolutely certain you have to be, because there's children involved. And there's so many more services available now for blended families. Some of the things that I read about today, I so wish we'd had that when we were starting out our blended family, but it just wasn't. There was a definite crack in our family for 5 or 6 years where we lost touch with one of our older children, and it was devastating. It was devastating all the way around. In a blended family, you have to be willing to swallow your pride, forgive. Doesn't mean you can forget, but it does mean that you have to forgive, because as a parent, you always want your child in your life, and as a step parent, you cannot stand in the way of that happening, irregardless of your feelings. And if that starts to happen, you as the step parent, you have to step back. Because I never ever wanted, and my husband feels the same way, we never wanted to be the person that caused a rift in our partner's relationship with their child. Because that is a cancer that will eventually destroy the marriage. But it's not an easy thing. And there were times that both of us were just like, how are we going to manage this? And you learn to forgive, you learn to compromise, you learn to let things go. You know, not crucial things. I'm just talking about the day-to-day silly things that can cause problems. And silly is maybe not the right word. Normal everyday things that can create these tensions and these fights and the hostility and the jealousy and the other parents sticking their nose in when they probably shouldn't. And it's just this very, very fine line that you have to walk as a step parent and as a parent, because now you have a commitment in a relationship to a stepchild as well. And if you're not willing to do that, make that commitment to that child, you absolutely should not venture into a blended family. You must do it. If you're not going to do it, then the blended family will not survive it, because stepchildren deserve the same commitment that you're going to give your own children. They're brought into the relationship, just like you are a couple and you have a child together. You've made that decision to have that child. You've brought that child into the world. It's the same principle, but just in a different format. You've made the decision to bring a stepchild into your relationship. And so as the step parent, you have to be willing to make that commitment to your stepchild. And you will always be the heavy. You've got to know that too. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You're always going to be the heavy. You're always going to be the bad guy. It doesn't matter. That's just, unfortunately, the way it is. And you have to develop a really thick skin. Relationships with your stepchildren, if you choose to do that, you are choosing to love a child that is not yours. And that is an unbelievable treasure and gift. And a lot of people don't look at it that way, and that's wrong. When you choose to love a child, that is a gift that you've gotten, that you didn't create. And it is a powerful feeling knowing that you are willing to love somebody else's child. And it can cause tremendous heartache as well. And you've got to go into that. You've got to go into knowing that could happen too. It is not blended families are never easy. Even as we get into adult years, you can still have similar type issues that you had with young children. In a blended family, absolutely, without a doubt, the most important thing in any blended family is your relationship and your communication, and the relationships that are built within that family unit, and the communication that everybody has with each other. And you have to, as the core unit, you have to make sure that the communication between each child is good, and the communication between each child and each parent is good, and each step parent is good. So you're taking on almost a duplication of your relationship with your child, but you have to do it. If you don't, it just creates a wall that will grow. A wall maybe is not a good analogy. A virus that will grow, and as it grows, it builds and it gets stronger and stronger, and eventually it could take the whole thing out. And you just don't want that to happen. Setting boundaries, setting priorities, and then making everyone accountable to those, including ex-spouses, is crucial. Now, there are situations where it just doesn't ever happen. And if that's the case, then you as that ex-party, meaning your ex-spouse, you just have to come to terms with it, because there are some ex-spouses that just will never support their child in a new blended family. And that's unfortunate, because the only one who really suffers then is the child. And that's unfortunate. But I see it every day. And it's just unfortunate. I have friends, I see it all the time. I deal with the public all the time. I deal with families all the time. And it's just unfortunate, because then nobody wins. There are legal issues too. When you set up a blended family, you as the couple have to be very, very clear on what you want. When it gets to the point where you're getting older and there's estates to be considered, you have to be very honest. You got to be very clear about what you want, and you have to make sure that your communication with your spouse is on point, and that you both agree that this is what we're going to do. Just like anything else, you've got to really have good communication about what's going to happen at that point. We're 34 years into our blended family, and we have 4 grandchildren now. And we are very fortunate. We still have struggles, just like every other family has struggles. As we get bigger, the more people, the more personalities, the bigger the struggle. That's just like in any family. My family has gone from 5 now to 17, I think. And the more people that are brought into the relationship, the more children that are born. We have your core unit of 5, and then the 3 of us got married, and now we have children of our own, and those children are married and have grandchildren. So it multiplies out, and so as that happens, personalities come in. Some personalities are stronger than others, and it's a constant balancing act. But that's the way it is with all families. Step families are just compounded because there are 2 other core family units involved. So instead of having 1, there's 3. So it can be this juggling act. And the only way to ever control the madness is for this unit, the 2 of you who have committed to be in this relationship with each other. This is why it has to be the priority above everything else, because if it's not, all these other tentacles of this massive big octopus are going to come in, and they're going to start to just tear it all away. I believe that, I've lived that, and I know that it works. And it can be a challenge sometimes, but you have to make the commitment to always choose the relationship. Everything else will sort of fall into place as long as you do that. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have all of the normal challenges, but you've just got to multiply it by 2, because there are, especially if both of you bring children into a relationship, because there is that child, and that child has another parent. And so you can imagine there's you, your child's parent, and your other child's parent, and then now they're married if they do get married. So there's 2 there and 2 here. That's 6 adults. And it truly is up to the adults to be the example for the children, because if the adults don't be the example for the children, the blended family children, how do we expect our blended children to be balanced children? Children learn what they see, and if the adults in their life can't communicate and have a good communication level, why would we think our children would? Our children learn from watching us. That's why it's so important to set boundaries. Can't cross those boundaries. We don't talk like that. We don't allow that kind of conduct. All of these boundaries are so important for you to articulate, and once you've set them, you cannot change them, and the 2 of you as the core unit have to always agree when the children are around. You may disagree, but never do it in front of your children. Go to the bedroom and disagree. Never, ever do it in front of the children, because the children will use that. It's just the way humans are. Communication is big. As I said, forgiving is big. And then there's also a financial aspect of having a blended family that we really never considered. As we made the decision and we got married, and then sometimes the ex-spouse and your partner now don't agree, and sometimes there's legal matters that come up, and that can be a very traumatic financial stress on a family. I can absolutely tell you that my youngest child, our child, probably will never venture into a blended family because of what he's seen. What he has seen all of us go through, and he has some scars from that. And I don't think he would ever be really willing to go through that because of what he's seen us go through. It can be a very traumatic thing. And it's really good that he can see it and has come to that conclusion, because I would caution anybody about today, especially because there are so many other outside influences on a family. Having a blended family in today's world is, I would have to guess, so much harder than when my husband and I did it 34 years ago. Just because of where our society is and what's going on in our society, and the deterioration of the family unit. So I would just guess it is much, much harder today even than it was when we started. But you're very lucky if you are, because there are so many more support groups and avenues for a blended family that we didn't have, because it wasn't the norm like it is today. It's very, very unusual when, especially if you're an older adult in your 30s, mid-30s, that there's not children already involved. So I'm 100% sure that my youngest would say he wouldn't venture into it, because he's just seen what we all have been through, and it at some points were very traumatic for us and for him. But it's also given him a very unique perspective on relationships. So there's always a positive and a negative, and I believe that wholeheartedly. My mother said to me all the time. Just because you're in a situation that is very negative doesn't mean that there's not a positive. You just really got to look for the positives. You got to work through all of the garbage to get to the positive. And she was so right, because now we have this beautiful relationship with our 3 children. We have 4 grandchildren, and we are lucky enough, at least on one side, to have a really nice relationship where we have even a bigger extended family. So there can be positives. You just have to be willing to work hard, communicate hard, commit to each other, and stick with it, just like anything else. But just go into it knowing that there are struggles, and there are going to be emotional baggage. There could be financial baggage too. You know, when you marry into a blended family and you either have to pay support or you get support, that can be an issue. So you have to be very clear in your communication about the financial aspects of a blended family. And you need to address all of that with your children so they understand how that all works. And, you know, you have to hold your stepchildren and your children, any child, whether they're a stepchild or your natural child. Accountability for children has to be a priority. Because if we don't make our children accountable, how are they going to be responsible adults? That's just common sense. Whether it's a stepchild or a regular child, they need to be accountable. So that's something that my husband and I definitely made our children aware of. Every decision in your life has a consequence. If you're not ready for the consequence, then you better rethink your decision, because you have consequences all through your life. All through your life. Everything you do in life has a consequence of some fashion. Good, bad, indifferent. There is consequences. And we're blessed, you know, but it has been a struggle. You got to have a good support system. You as a couple have to have a good support system. Your children have to have a good support system. And I would say the most important thing in a blended family is love. Because with that, you can do anything. And communication is second. It is absolutely crucial to learn how to communicate with each other, how to communicate with your stepchildren and your stepchildren's other parent. If you can do that, you'll be okay. You will be okay. It just takes a lot of work, and it's not going to happen overnight. We've been fortunate. And it's just been, we're just very fortunate. We're very blessed. Our children all get along. They're all stable. They've never been involved in crimes. They are respectful people. They've got good jobs. They're good parents. 2 of the 3. The youngest doesn't have any children. And that's because they've had examples. Children learn from example. So be careful, because they're always watching. I will tell you that too. But that's any parent, not whether you're a step parent or a natural parent. And I hope this helps. Somebody asked me not too long ago with everything I know now and everything that we've been through now, as a married couple, 34 years married, 36 years together, would I make the same decision today as I made back then? And it's a really good question. I love my family, but I just don't know, because there's been challenges along the way. I wouldn't trade any of them for anything. but there's been challenges along the way, and at sometimes it's been a lot. Probably yes, because ultimately the most important thing is my relationship with my husband, and your children are always going to be your children, whether you're in a original marriage or if you're in a step situation. So putting that first has to be the priority. Everything else will just fit into it. And in some cases, it just doesn't fit into it. And can you be okay with that? That's the question that you can only answer yourself. At some point, we all have that question we have to answer. When you're in step relationships and in a blended family. I'm very lucky and I'm very blessed. 3 beautiful children, 4 grandchildren. You're 34, and we are just living our life. But it has been a challenge, for sure. My youngest son will say absolutely no. He would never be in a blended family. But he has seen all of it. You see, he was the spectator watching all of the drama and all of the relationship building and falling apart and rebuilding and all of that. So I can understand why my youngest son has that point of view, because he's witnessed it all. And I would never want to change that for him. He may at some point, but I would certainly never want to try to influence or change that position, because only you as a person can know whether or not stepping into a blended family could work for you, because it is not easy. And anybody that tells you differently is not being truthful with you. It can work, and you can have a beautiful life if you work hard enough at it and you have really good communication, but that's in any relationship. It just takes a little bit more work because there's more human beings involved and more relationships involved. And the more there are, the harder it is. That is just the nature of humanity. So I hope this helps. I am absolutely here for you if you are watching this video and you're in a blended family and you are ready to pull your hair out or pull the plug and you feel like you need somebody to talk to. Please reach out to me. I didn't have that in the very beginning, and I wish desperately I'd had somebody to talk to about the nucleus of building this blended family. I had no experience with it. My family had no experience with it. I was the first divorce in my family. So I really mean this. If you are in that situation and you are in a blended family and you are struggling, please reach out to me. The worst thing you can do is not reach out to somebody. This is a hard thing. It's a complicated thing. It can be emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting. So please reach out to somebody. If you don't reach out to me, reach out to somebody else, because there are plenty of services out there. You just got to go find them. And I can help you with that. If that's something that you're not sure where to begin, please reach out to me and we'll talk about it and get a game plan together for you, because it's my life. It's just part of my life. It's how my life unfolded, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, because it's my family. As hard as it is, it's my family. And without that, what is there? Not a lot. Just life. And life is meant to be lived with others that you love and love you. That's the complex equation of life. Learning to live with others, love each other, hate each other, but always be there for each other. So this is Kerrie. Conversations at Kerrie's Korner is all about starting communication. I really believe in my soul of souls that conversation is the key, because it's communication. And this podcast is all about having a place to start a conversation, because if you start a conversation and you're respectful of the other parties and you're willing to listen and listen to their position, that's where true change can happen. I know that. I've experienced it in my life. And I feel like at this point in our civilization and in our nation, we have to learn to communicate better than we are, because it is the key to everything. Communication is the key to everything. And if we're not communicating, which we are not, it explains why we have such a major divide. Think about this picture. The corner store, the corner diner. You go in on a Saturday, you've been out shopping, and you decide to, or you headed out for shopping and you decide to go in and have a coffee. You sit down at the bar, you have a coffee and maybe a pancake or a sandwich, and you happen to strike up a conversation with somebody that's sitting next to you. And that one conversation can change something. That's what we need to be. That's where we need to get. We need to be able to listen respectfully to each other and respect somebody else's position, but listen to somebody else's position, because it could change your position by just the way that's delivered. That's what we've got to get back to. We've got to get back to communicating with each other, coming to the middle and respectfully listening and communicating, because that truly is where change can begin. And if I can be a catalyst for that, that is a dream come true. It really, really is, because I know it can work. It's worked in my own family. Because without communication, no relationship can survive without good communication, especially a blended family. So thanks for joining me today. Conversations at Kerrie's Korner. We'd love for you to listen to us twice a week. This is podcast number 3, and I'm enjoying this. We're going to be adding people as we go. We're going to be adding hopefully some call-ins maybe, and some guest speakers, and we're going to be talking about any subject, as long as it is a subject that can be a constructive conversation that can lead to just that, starting a conversation with somebody, and potentially getting back to the middle where we can go back into that diner, sit down next to somebody that we don't know, and come away with a completely different perspective on something you thought maybe you were never going to change your opinion on. All because we had a conversation. God bless you. I hope you have a remarkable rest of your day. This is Kerrie from Conversations at Kerrie's Korner. God bless you, and God bless these United States. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Bye-bye.